All right, Craig,
Yeah.
I'm excited. This is our kickoff. Great to be launching our MSP Unfiltered podcast. I thought it was appropriate that we start with your story because as we kind of hinted at in the introduction, I think your personality is unfiltered. And I mean that more in an authentic sense than in a, you're going to say, whatever is on your mind. But I
Yeah.
think I think everyone who knows you knows that you kind of speak your mind, and they know they're getting it straight. So,
Yeah.
given that, first, welcome to
Yeah.
everyone who watches us.
Yeah.
We're excited to kick off our MSP Unfiltered podcast, and today I really want to delve into your story. To give some background to everyone, we met a couple of years ago at the IT Nation Connect conference, and you were just making a career change. And I want to get into that, where you had just made a career change. So let's start there. So you're at Evergreen,
Yeah.
and I think when we first met, you started educating me about this entire sector
Yeah.
of companies that buy other MSPs, and you've now got a lot of experience in your belt. So let's start with what you do, and then let's rewind and take
Okay.
us back to how you got here. And then for everyone else, we're going to end on that Tony Hawk moment, which I thought was an inspiring moment for a lot of us. So that's the arc of today's podcast.
All right.
So let's talk about what you do right now and kind of what led you here.
Yeah. Thanks, Anoop. It's great to be here, and I love this MSP Unfiltered. We'll share what we think. I'm hoping the outcome we can get out of this is learn from others. Right. This is a great community. I think there needs to be some accountability in the community as well. Maybe get some things out there. But so I'm at Evergreen now. We acquire MSPs. I love doing this, and I'm here because I've met so many MSP owners and great people in this community along the way that have done a lot of good work, and I want them to get rewarded for that. And when I left ConnectWise, I had some options, but this one felt the most aligned to my mission. I've gotten a lot out of this community. Wealth, a great family, a great job, all the things. I feel I found success, and success to me is people one day saying, yeah, he's a man of his word. He shoots straight. What he says is what happens. That's my success thing I've been tracking. And now that I have achieved a lot of the success I was looking for, I want all my friends to as well. Because I've been there. I've visited hundreds of MSPs. I've seen the failures. I've seen the hard times. I've seen the good times. And it'd be a shame for, that to be given up. And I really just found myself aligned to the mission of Evergreen, which is buy companies, hold forever, preserve the legacy, keep the brand, the people, the systems, everything that made them great, just work to grow them. And I feel that aligns with a lot of people in this community as well. And it's not for everyone. And the good news is there's a lot of options. Just like when I was at ConnectWise, I'd say all the time, you just need to do this in your business. And there's options. There's ConnectWise, Kaseya, Enable, and now there's even more. But that's what I'm doing at Evergreen. We're building a big global presence of MSPs, keeping them all decentralized and separate. And, I'm just out there doing the best I can to make it sure everybody knows that there's an option here. I don't ever want to push anybody to do something they're not ready for, but I just want to make sure everybody knows what their options are. And what's wild is 10 years ago, we weren't even talking about it in the industry, right? We were all just talking about, we were in that storming and forming what managed services is. And now at that point where investors are like, wait, there's gold over here. And here they come. I think what I just tell people is don't get in an M&A frenzy. Like, again, there's a lot of talk about it. And I hear it all the time. Oh my God, I don't want to go to this event because it's just full of people wanting to buy business. And I try and stay away from that. I just hey, I just want to hang out with my friends, make them aware of what we're doing, and then make your choice.
I know you work for some luminaries in the field. take us back a moment to ConnectWise.
Yeah. Well, I do like to start a little earlier than that because I think a lot of people don't realize, like, I really do have a deep technical background. Some of the techs that come to conferences, they jab at me, and I'm like, I probably know more than you know. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, real small, 4,000 people. My high school graduating class was 80, and I did not do well. I graduated like with a 2.3 GPA. Okay. Like, I just skateboarded. That was all I did. I'm like, bare minimum to get out of this, and I'm skateboarding. But my mother was a librarian, and so I spent all my time in the library after school, just learning systems, watching how to deliver service, right? Because the library was Google, before the internet. If you wanted to know something, you went to the library.
Yep.
And chances are you didn't know how to use the Dewey Decimal System. You didn't know where to go looking for stuff. So you grabbed a librarian, and I would watch my mother, and I learned a lot on like what service looks like. And then my father, he was worked on the assembly line at General Motors. And I think I got the mechanical side from him of wanting to tinker and be in things. And when the library got its first Apple IIe in 1981, I was in front of it, and I had to compute magazines, you're just copying code, hitting execute, gives you an error, and then you got to retype the whole thing. And that was how I got my start. And then I
got my start on BASIC, FYI, and Commodores. But you're also a car guy. I know that. Did you get that from your dad?
Yeah, from my dad, because he would bring friends' cars, IR cars, swapping out motors. I mean, we were doing it all, full restorations, paint, body work. And I, one of the greatest things I ever was able to pull off with everything I got from ConnectWise was I was able to build my own shop. And my father passed away a while back, and it kind of kills me. He doesn't get to see it. Mm-hmm. But, I know he's there, and I hope he's proud of, like, we've always dreamed of like having our own full shop and like I got a paint booth, and I do all that, but skateboarding was the big love. And I got some lessons learned we'll get into during the Tony part. But, when I wanted to get out of town, small town. I think everybody feels it's a small town. I can't wait to get out of here. And a Marine recruiter called me at the right time and the right mood, and I joined. My mother was so upset. You were going to be my one son that went to college. Not with a 2.3. See you later. I joined the Marines, and one thing I like, Major Craig Edmonds, another Craig. I'll never forget. I'm in the office there. I had a desk job in the Marines. I'll admit it. I'm not the war hero, but I'm working away on the IBM Wheelwriter, and he's watching me. He's, what are you doing there? I'm like, I'm programming macros because I hate retyping this stuff over and over and over. And he's like, you good with computers? I'm like, I haven't had one. And he said, that's the future. You should get into that. And that night, this is not made up. Driving home, I see a billboard. You want to learn computer networking? Come to Stotzenberger College in Toledo, Ohio. So the next day I went down there. Lo and behold, I got my first Novell certificate out of that place. And then Cisco and Microsoft. And then when I got out of the Marines, I found myself at Accenture, which we have a background in. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like, and like, I think growing up listening to my dad be in an auto workers union and a lot of the statements he would make about big General Motors and moving things. And I think being in a big enterprise environment wasn't for me. So, I left that 2006 and I started doing freelance contracting. And I'll bring this up because so many people I know that own their own MSP or IT services businesses started in a very similar way. Has some certifications, was working for someone and thought I can do this on my own. Yeah. So 2006, I landed a big contract with a big insurance company, a big accounting firm, and I was doing Exchange migrations and build outs and Cisco Catalyst build outs, and thought I might be onto something. And then that's when I met David Bellini of ConnectWise. He is interacting with one of the accounting firms I was working for, and he's like, "You don't want to own your own business. It's too risky. You can't handle that. You're a guy that wants to be able to shut it off." He was right. And boom, there I was at ConnectWise. And I was working at the MSP. I was a field engineer, we had a hybrid field engineer / account manager, dedicated up to a lot of accounting firms, construction, some hospitality. And at that time, the MSP was 15 people and the software company was 15 people. And I'd say, "What are they doing over there? What is that?" They're like, "They're making these systems." I'm like, "Oh man, I love systems."
And it's probably fair to say
there.
At that time, MSP is a little generous of a term, right? I mean,
yeah,
most people were IT consultants,
systems integrators, value-added resellers, right?
Bars, help desk, break fix, etc. Right? And part of the story of ConnectWise is really helping these companies get to manage and get to automation, right?
When I joined there, I remember thinking, because we actually at Accenture internally, they were doing managed services. So there was some managed services inside, right? Because big organization, a lot of internal chargebacks. When I joined, I'm like, "How are you putting these small businesses on managed services?" And they said, "Well, it's typically our higher end professional service, like the accountants, law firms. They tended to be down with the managed services because they understood how technology could be leveraged in their business for productivity and growth. And they were good with that." And, and it was a couple years in that I was like, I was really stressed out supporting small business. I cared a lot. I was putting in a lot of hours, making sure everything was running all the time. And I did burn myself out. And I met Arnie, and he's like, "I'm going to transform the world into managed services." And I was like, "This guy's crazy." What?
And Arnie is Arnie Bellini.
Right. He is a force and very visionary person. And if you ever talk to him and he gets going, you can't help but get on board. Like, when I thought I was leaving the MSP, he sat down for 2 hours and described his vision of transforming the world, enabling small business with technology through managed services. And I thought, this guy's crazy, but I want to do it.
And you had quite a run at ConnectWise, and you want to take us through that story real quick?
Yeah, I'll run through it. So when I joined, Arnie had to sing like, "You got to walk the path." So I started out supporting the software, then implementing it, then teaching on it, and then consulting on it on site at MSPs. And then next thing you knew, I'm like consulting on the MSP business, right? And wrote a book. I actually wrote this internal book called The Path to Success at ConnectWise, 289 pages. Wow. I'm always counting. But it was after all that time in the field and working with Kay Vanderleest and Janine Sullivan and Michelle Ibrahim, learning I'm not taking credit for all this, Kathy Smith. It was like a culmination of all this documented in this book. And it was like, this is how you do managed services. And then that's when it was like, you should manage the product. Like, you've already done all the work. And, when you're managing product, having that much knowledge, you can move really fast, right? We've had these talks, like, especially with ThreatMate. It's like, you don't have to hold the focus groups. You don't have to check with people. You've walked the path. One of my favorite lines Arnie delivered to me was, "When I'm done with you, you're going to be able to walk minefields." It was a hard path. You got to socialize with people. You got to put in the hours. You got to help people through the pains. You got to, like skateboarding, you got to get back up after you fall, heal, wipe the bruises, and keep going.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to switch topics a little bit here.
Let's do it.
I know I want to lean in a little bit more on the cars, because you know a lot more about cars than I do. And I'm guessing some of the folks that might tune in like cars as well. So tell us about current projects. Every time I'm talking about a car, for you, it's not good enough off the rack, so to speak. Whatever you get is a project that needs some work. Tell us about some of your favorite projects and what you've done.
Yeah. So I've always had the dream of having a 1965 Impala lowrider, right? I grew up in the 90s. I mean, one of my favorite albums was The Chronic, Dr. Dre, and then everything that followed that, right? And it was always lowriders in the videos. And I'm like, I want one of those, but I don't have the money. And at the same time, I've always had this dream, like, I don't like the expression bucket list, but I'll just use it. It's been on my list to do a nut and bolt restoration of a car top to bottom. And a couple years ago, I was sitting on the side of the road at a lobster shack in Maine,
Wow.
Not exaggerating. And I had a couple beers down and I see on eBay, oh my gosh, there's a convertible Impala on auction. It ends in an hour. And I see a phone number on there and I call it and the guy tells me, yeah, the car is great. I'm like, I bid and I won. And I remember sitting there and my wife's across from me. I go, hey, so got some news? We got a new car. She's great. And car shows up. What a disaster. Holes in the floor, holes in the quarter boards, frames rusted out. So I tore that car down, every nut and bolt, sent the frame to now a friend of mine who does blasting. And he blasted the bare metal, repaired it, repainted it, rebuilt the engine, transmission, put new floor. I learned how to weld. Like I watched a lot of YouTube videos.
Oh,
I
wow.
could weld before, but I had to really dial it in on sheet metal. And
Interesting.
did the body work, built a paint booth, painted the car, did all the upholstery. And when people see the car, I think they're like, you did all this? I'm like, yeah. I don't think they grasp
How much?
the 600 hours. And took me 3 years. And I'll tell you what, man, the satisfaction, that car is my favorite car because I'm like, I know everything that's going on in here. So that now that that's done, I've got this like 80s, 90s thing that I want to relive. Like, when we were in high school, a lot of people tuned in. You're like, oh man, I always wanted a Camaro Z28.
Right.
Well,
Right.
for me,
Yeah.
it was the GMC Typhoon. I'm like, man, if one day, if I have money, and a lot of people don't know about this car. It's their little Blazer from the 90s.
Okay.
And they only made like 4,000 of them. And it was a turbocharged V6. It was the fastest SUV in the world for 10 years until Porsche put one out. And recently, a friend's like, you're not going to believe this. There's a Typhoon sitting in a shop down here. A guy's looking to get rid of it. I went down there, saw it. By the time I got home, I had already sold 2 cars. I sold a little S10 pickup I had and a Trans Am. So I was like, I have to have that. So that's the current project. So it's in great shape, but I want to repaint it. I want to rebuild the turbo. So, and then motorcycles. So, it's not a good idea for me to drink tequila and get on auction sites. It's horrible, horrible idea. But the good thing is like all my purchases are cheap. So I got a 52 Harley Panhead that, I used to, like a lot of people, watch that American Chopper show. And I'm like, I want to build one of those one day. So I bought one and I bought all the parts and we're in the middle of that. So those are my projects. So people ask me all the time, where do you find time for this? When everybody goes to bed, I go out in the garage at like 10, 11, bust open a Coors Light, and away we go. And then
I'm certain there are folks listening to this who did skateboard as a kid growing up and can relate back to that, but also athletes as well, right? A lot of what you talked about was putting in the practice, honing your craft until you get it really good. But not everyone gets a chance to get up on stage with a legend like Tony Hawk, right? So, he's one of, whether you follow skateboarding or not, you know who Tony Hawk is. Obviously, he was a keynote speaker at IT Nation Connect. We had sort of a 90s theme for that event, and Tony was part of that. We were sitting at a conference before that where you were talking about, oh my God, Tony is a hero. He's someone I've worshipped growing up. Is there any way, and you were talking to Jason McGee, who was the outgoing CEO of ConnectWise, is there any way I could meet Tony? And I remember Jason's response because I was sitting at the table. He goes, "I don't know if I'm going to make me." And that's kind of the last I, thought of it until I happened to see you on stage doing something spectacular. So fill in the blanks. How did
Yeah.
the moment happen? How did it come together?
Yeah. I didn't think it was going to happen. So many people thought I had something to do with Tony being there. I absolutely did not. I did Ed Viesters. That's another story. But yeah, Jason texted me like 4 hours later and said, well, I'm going to give you a parting gift as I leave. I was going to do the Q&A portion, moderate it for Tony. You do it. And I'm like, wow. I knew exactly I was extremely grateful. And Kayla Vandenberg, extremely grateful. I ran out of that resort down to the nearest skateboard shop. Really? And I could not believe they had a complete Tony Hawk deck sitting there. And I'm like,
obviously to go to the conference with your skateboard, right?
I didn't. Yeah. Well, I was like, and listen, this thing, even Tony admitted, like, this is a retail board. I wouldn't try a kickflip on that thing. I mean, it's rough. So I when I saw the board there, I said, I knew exactly what I need to do. Because Tony has this YouTube video where he drives around yelling at people, do a kickflip. And if they landed, he gives them a gift. I thought, I'm going to get them to do it. Now, the plan was all falling apart the more enough, because when I got down there, they're like, hey, he's not going to rehearse. He's showing up and going on stage. I'm like, wait, I'm not even going to get to talk to him. I'm like, oh, man. So I'm back there, and I had not done a kickflip in 4 years, but I still ride. So I was like, all right, let's see if we can get this down. I'm trying. All of a sudden I hear this, who's that guy? And someone said, that's Craig. And we're behind stage. And I look up and it's Tony. He's finally showed up. He goes, hey, Craig, do a kickflip. And I tried one and it was a mess. And then he goes on stage. So I'm standing there and the production crew's like, what are you doing on that skateboard? I was like, I'm gonna take it on stage. No, you're not.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I'm gonna have him sign it. And they're like, no, he can't, you're not doing it on stage. Like, it's not in the agreement with him. And I'm like, oh, man. I was like, all right, I'll just carry it out there. And
they clearly don't know you.
they know me because I did all the keynotes with them. They're like, Craig, do not ride the skateboard on stage. And I'm like, what? They're like, the fire marshal's here. We have no railing. You can't, do not. And I'm like, okay. As I'm standing there waiting to go on, I thought, I'm a skater. I defy authority.
You got it.
I'm doing what I want to do here. And if this is my last one, so be it. So I ride out. Didn't know what was going to happen. Someone yelled from the crowd, do a kickflip. and then another, and then another. And then Tony's like, yeah, do a kickflip. And
there you go.
I'll shit myself because I'm like, okay. Now I got 3,500 people here, and it's carpet, and it's a retail board. I've not landed a kickflip really on this thing. All right, screw it. And I thought, what I thought I knew? I love comedy. I'm like, I'm just going to fall over and make it funny. Like, look, he busted his butt on stage. When that first kickflip went around and was like, wait, there's a chance I could land this. The look on Tony's face, you got to try it again, man. I know you can do it. And when I heard him say those words, I know you can do it. That was all I needed. And it was like I was all in the zone. And I'm like, I'm going to land this right now. And when you skateboard, like if you do a lot of it, you're not committing to a trick sometimes. Like, it's all really in the back foot. It's like, you can decide to commit your back foot or not. And when you decide to commit it, that is when you are going to crash 99% of the time. So I was like, I'm committing. And when I landed on the board, man, I blacked out. I don't even remember. I'm just like, wow, the adrenaline rush. And all of a sudden I'm laying on the floor and I'm getting up and I'm high-fiving a legend and just thinking, I can't even believe it. And
you absolutely nailed it in front of 3,500 people, also broadcast with someone you hero worship. I mean,
well, a lot of times when this kickflip trick, right? You're basically jumping up, you're ollieing up and flicking it with your front foot and catching it. Now, I did not catch it. It was kind of an ugly one, but I landed on the bolts. That's a big deal. We say bolts. He landed bolts. Like,
okay.
I wasn't leaning back. And, you know, the best part about that is like, and I know it sounds corny, and a lot of people might be like, he's just talking. People were saying it to me. It was not me. It felt like the community, you know, in the 15 years of me interacting with everybody. And it was like, we were up there doing that kickflip, and we landed that kickflip with Tony Hawk. Like, a lot of people said that to me. Craig, I don't even know you, but it feels like I do, because I've seen you so
much. You're one of us, right? You're one of us.
Like us. We landed that. And I'm like, that's right, man. Like,
yeah.
And I don't even know where to take it from here.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that Jason, the folks at B, gave you that opportunity, and the fact that you rose to it is absolutely amazing. So, and so that video is out there. I know you posted it to your LinkedIn. It is amazing to watch, and the cheers that happened, it absolutely rocked the entire room. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Good. Don't know if I'll ever be back up there, but I guess if that was it, I want to go out with like that, you know?
I don't think you should go back up. I mean, how do you beat that, right?
I don't know. There's one more person in Noop I want to meet in my life, and I'll figure it out. Ryan Reynolds, because that guy is a marketing genius.
Yeah.
Everything he touches turns to gold. He just is that kind of person. You're like, I want to be friends with him. I really admire that about him. And I would love to meet that person one day and ask him a lot of questions.
All right. You put the challenge
We'll
out.
See what happens.
Let's have the universe, you know, work on that.
I'll put it out
there. that was an amazing story. Thank you, Craig, for sharing your story. I hope other people can find those points, which, you know, I found my points, which I relate. I think there's a lot to your background. Growing up as you did, the challenges that you took on, the service to country, finding your way into a software high-tech company that revolutionized the industry with some others, and now, frankly, helping people dreams come true. It's an amazing journey you've been on. Obviously, that story with Tony, you know, is definitely caps it off. So.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig, for sharing. That was truly amazing.
Thanks, Anoop. I appreciate you having me here, and I'm looking forward to the other great legends in our industry that have learned a lot and still have a lot to say, bringing them on here too.
Well, we're going to invite some folks over the coming weeks to share their stories, and I know we've got one coming up next week, so we'll put out some information on that pretty soon.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, you know, look forward to catching up with you guys again next week. And this was great. Thanks, Craig, for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody.